Hello everybody, this is Chaotic Bibliophile, and today I bring you my September wrap-up. This is not exclusively my September wrap-up, however, so it is more catching up on book reviews, but I thought it would be better for morale, and by morale I mean my own, if I call this just a September wrap-up, because it means I am caught up with wrap-ups. Let's just start with the digital books, or like books that for whatever reason I don't have here. And actually, I will start with a DNF, Either or by Elif Batuman. I shouldn't maybe have started with this book because it is, according to the Storygraph, the sequel to The Idiot, but okay, so I don't even really know what this book is about. I know The Idiot is about this student. It's like very, not autofictional, but like kind of semi-autobiographical. It talks about this young woman who is doing her PhD in the 90s, and there's a lot about emails and about, just existing and romance and bad romantic relationships. I will read The Idiot because it sounds like it might be better than Either or. Certainly reviews were better. But here's my thing. I have read The Possessed by Elif Batuman, and I love that book. That is her memoir. In this memoir, she talks about her views on art and her struggles, or sort of like randomness with which her academic career was configured, but at the same time she is so intelligent and insightful and also honest and plain funny. And so like if you like campus novels, then you should definitely read The Possessed. What a great memoir. However, Either or has nothing of that zest, and fair enough, I just bailed so early on because I couldn't bear it. Starts with the woman talking about Ivan, and apparently Ivan also makes an appearance in The Idiot, but I didn't care. I couldn't stand it. I just started reading it, and I was reading it on my cell phone, I think, and I just closed that app and deleted that book right away. So let's move on to books that I actually read. The first digital one is How to Order the Universe by María José Ferrada, and I forget who this was translated by. I will credit the translator down below. And I spoke about this book already in my BookTube Prize final round wrap-up, which will also be linked down below and in the eye as always. But basically, this is a first-person narrative about a girl who goes selling sort of hardware store supplies with her absent dad, and the relationship that blooms between them, which is always strange and reified because the dad is clearly absent and emotionally neglectful, but during those trips they really connect and hit it off. And there's also the mom situation. It's just fascinating, her observations on class and affection and respect and sort of the old-timey code versus the new way of existing and subsisting. It's just very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I think the prose was amazing. It does child narrator really well. It's still quirky. I feel like if you really, really hate children narrator, this book is not going to change your mind, but it's still really, really good, and I really recommend it. Then I read Feminist City, Claiming Space in a Man-Made World. I read this because Dani happened to have a copy and she lent it to me while she was in London. It was really, really great. This is half memoir, half theory about how women inhabit and can inhabit the city. And as I never get tired of reminding you, I love urban studies, city studies, and the fact that this is filtered through a feminist perspective is fascinating, especially because it's very intersectional. Although the author is white, she is very aware of her privilege as a white woman. It is so interesting how it talks about female friendships and female relations. It hits that sweet spot, as I said, of memoir and academic, and it also hits that sweet spot of data and theory, sort of more abstract concepts, because I am reading a book that I am really enjoying, but it's also really, really theoretical. And I'm like, I wish there was a bit more solid data here. Oh yeah, I also read The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World. I hated this book. It is a book that I would have never picked up if it hadn't been for the BookTube prize. So if you want to know what this book is about and what I felt about it in a bit more detail, you can refer back to the book. But like, I just don't want to think about this book anymore. So I'm just gonna skip it. Next is The Rock from the Sky by John Klassen. And this is a children's book with, I'm gonna put, of course, the cover here. And if I find some illustrations, I will also put them here, because it's just like such a deadpan cute book. One of those books that like it would be really easy to read with a child in terms of the words. It doesn't have many words pretty much at all, but it's savage. There are these animals and one of them like likes a specific spot, and when they finally convince the animal to move, I think it's a turtle, a rock falls from the sky on the exact spot where this turtle was standing. The point is, the rock would have killed it. And the aesthetics are very much in accordance to that premise. I loved it. It is the exact type of children's book that I adore, and if I had the space and the resources, I would buy every single book this author has done, because it's just fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it. Again, one of those books that like you can read to your kid and they'll understand, but then sort of the layers of humor are actually quite adult. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. There is also Ladrilleros or Brickmakers by Selva Armada. This is a book that I also really, really liked, and it won 3rd place, I think, in the BookTube prize, so that is really, really cool. I really, really enjoyed it. It is a book about 2 families, and specifically the men in the family, the dad and the sons of each guy. It's the Tamais and the, I forget the other last name. But basically they live in the same town, and something happens that makes the family sort of clash. But for the majority of the book, you just see these 2 families live their lives completely in parallel without intersecting much. What is most interesting about it is the exploration of masculinity and violence and sort of the role of women in this. And although there are aspects that didn't fully convince me, specifically the ending, which I feel was a bit exploitative, I still really liked it. I still had a lot of complex feelings about it, not knowing how to feel about specific choices. It offers a lot of different possible readings and possible experiences, so I actually enjoyed that. I thought that was great, and the book in general is so good, and it is so raw and honest but not gratuitous, and the prose is really good. So yeah, Brickmakers by Selva Armada, highly recommend. A book that I can barely believe I read is Less is Lost by Sean Greer. You are wondering why the hell I don't have a copy of this, and it's because I read the proof copy that there was at the shop. I felt so important. I read it like 3 days before it came out. It's nothing, and I know like proper booktubers do get ARCs all the time, and it's not a big deal. Let me have this, okay? If you don't know, Less is one of my all-time favorite books. I was actually quite concerned about a sequel because I don't feel necessarily that the book needed a sequel. So the first one is about this middle-aged, middling writer who has had some success, but not massive. And he had this on and off boyfriend, not boyfriend, for like 10 years. They finally broke it up because the boyfriend is getting married. And so in order to avoid going to the wedding, Les sets off in a world tour. And it is such a fascinating book that often people comment is very light and insubstantial, or like just all right or fine. But I will die on the hill that it is actually a fascinatingly crafted book that is doing so much with so little, and I just love it. But I don't think it needed a second part, and so I was very, very concerned about the sequel. It is a bit winky to the first one because like the author wants you to get it. I feel like there were things that could have been cut because they wouldn't have made a difference in the narrative, and the only reason they were there was to wink at the first one. So you could be like, hey, yeah, cool. Things that if you didn't read the first one, you just don't need to know, period. The conceit does not work as well in this one. The narratorial, let's call it, conceit of the first one, it doesn't work in the same way. However, it is still super entertaining. It still has that sort of uplifting, sad introspection that characterizes the first one. There is some value in seeing what happens after the big romantic gesture, what happens after happy ever after, right? If you like the first one a lot, I really recommend this one. If you haven't read either, go read the first one. And if you really liked the first one or thought it was really solid but didn't love it enough that you would just want to hang out with the characters over and over, then I think you can skip this one, because it's not like groundbreaking in the same way that I feel like the first one actually was, and I will again die on this hill. Finally, I'm going to tell you about The Instance by Amy Liptrot, and I got this because it was nominated for the Wynn Prize for Nature Writing, and this is not nature writing. Why does this keep happening? The fact that a book has some nature interactions does not make it nature writing. And this is... Okay, I did enjoy this, by the way, somewhat. So this started really great because it was about this woman who moves to Berlin, and it's a lot about relationships and desire, but it got repetitive. It got way too long. Again, there is some nature writing. There is raccoon seeking involved, but the main thing is that it's a memoir about the time she spent with this guy and sort of how you get over love and how you get over a heartbreak, and those are great topics, but it is not nature writing. And since I picked it up because I was craving nature writing, it didn't work for me. It is a book that I would recommend to people who really like memoirs and who would love to read a memoir about love and desire with like really good lush writing plus some nature stuff. In that way, it is a really good memoir, but as nature writing, no. Two books I am just briefly gonna mention. The Art of Losing by Alice Zeniter and Disquiet by Zülfü Livaneli. These two I also reviewed for the BookTube prize, linked down below in the eye as always. This one I thought was really meh, and I am actually not keeping at all. And this one I thought was really good, and I would like to reread it eventually, except for some war stuff that like I have no interest in reading about the battlefield, save very few exceptions. But still, even in like War and Peace, the battle scenes, although when it goes philosophical it's really good, I still don't love it, and I don't love those scenes. So anyways, this is about intergenerational discovery and immigration and trauma and how you seek your roots. It's about a young woman who is basically this disaster millennial woman, and she starts tracing her heritage back to her family before they moved to, I want to say, France, from Algeria, if I'm not mistaken. The prose was great, and then there are some more meta stuff that start happening with the book and the writing of the book. And yeah, it's just a really nice point of view, and it's really well crafted, so I actually really recommend it. This, on the other hand, I thought it was just okay, kind of commercial fiction about important topics, and it's about this guy who is Turkish and works for a refugee camp and falls in love with a Syrian girl and what happens. And again, I feel like the plot has zero relevance on anything. It's just this was written to proselytize, which is not very interesting regardless of the topic, which is very important. Next up, I have volumes 1 and 2 of Nana by Ai Yazawa. And this series I'm buddy reading with Natalie from Curious Reader. I will link her link down below. She's been incredibly patient. First, I was very slow in reading them and replying, and then they've gone out of stock. So I am scrambling to get these, but it's not gonna be easy. So really, Natalie, thank you so much. Anyways, this is the story of two women named Nana. One is this really codependent, easy to fall in love young woman who doesn't really understand much of the world, and because of her friends and horrible boyfriend moved to Tokyo, she decides to move to Tokyo as well. Instead of her making her way through that, parallel to that is also Nana. So one is Nana Komatsu, the one I just talked about, and the other is Nana Osaki. Nana Osaki. Nana Osaki is a singer and she also goes to Tokyo. Their personalities are quite the opposite, but because of a certain number of events, they ended up living together. Honestly, I am really interested. I really like Nana Osaki and I like their friendship. Nana Komatsu gets on my nerves because that girl is so whiny and stressful. However, they are a good pair and the manga is very interesting, so I do want to keep reading it. I also want to tell you about Gender, a graphic guide by Meg-John Barker and Jules Scheele? I think it's Scheele. Anyways, this I bought basically because my dad wanted some resources about gender stuff and I recommended this because this is translated to Spanish. So this is what it looks like. It is all black and white and this is not, I wouldn't say a graphic novel. It's definitely graphic nonfiction, but yeah, it's mostly like text with illustrations, but the way they intertwine is actually very interesting. How can I say this? Because it's not like it goes in depth, but it's also not superficial. Of course, if you are already familiar with everything, you don't need to read it really, but I think it is such an amazing primer because it gives you a lot of information to follow up, a lot of recommendations, and a lot of theorists that you can read next if you are interested in what they say. And the way they represent it is fascinating. The way it talks about gender is very nuanced. That's the word that I was looking for. For such a short introductory book, it is super nuanced and it takes real care to talk about all the points, even the points of dissent about how gender is constructed, although of course this is very intersectional in its approach. Still, it takes the time to engage, for example, with transphobia. So it's just fascinating and I really enjoyed it. I am so glad it exists. It should be mandatory reading in high schools. And yeah, if you know anyone who would benefit from some education, I don't think it's patronizing at all. I think it's very accessible, but still treating the reader with intelligence and kindness. I love that it referenced so much theory, even clashing theories. So it's great. It's a great starting point. There is one more book that I read in September, but I loved it so much and I've gotten quite tired filming this now. So I am going to make the executive choice of talking about this book in my October wrap up. So I'm sorry for the spoiler. I'm sorry for bringing it up. I could have just stopped there, but I wanted to be truthful. That's it. Let me know if you like this video in the comments and tell me, have you read any of these books? Do you want to read any of these books? I hope you're doing great. How are you feeling about autumn? How are you feeling about winter? I hope everything's all right with you. See you next time.